Dive deep into the world of work, what people do, why they do it, and how they got there. From dream jobs to unexpected paths, every story matters and every career has a story worth sharing. Today, our special guest is Ray Mancha. Thank you so much for coming. Go ahead and tell people what you did because you recently retired. Congratulations. You made it. So what did you do when you worked?
Well, I was a counselor specializing in substance abuse.
Okay.
How I got into it, I always wanted to get into the helping field.
Uh-huh.
I was a builder contractor for about 18 years, first 18 years of my work history.
Nice.
And work got really bad. Always wanted to go back to school. But I struggled, I would get excited about going back to school, and then I would talk myself out of it.
Yeah.
Barely got through high school. What am I going to do in college? Just
Okay.
embarrass myself.
Yeah.
And work got really, really bad, really slow. So I took a job at Midland College as a maintenance man.
Okay.
And it took me 2 years to realize that being an employee at Midland College, they paid my tuition.
Oh, nice.
Had a friend that I went to school with, graduated with, and we kind of had like parallel lives.
Mm-hmm.
He got into the oil field straight out of high school.
Okay.
Right about that time, a few years before, his company went down. They closed down. And so they gave him a large severance package and stuff. And part of that was 2 years paid schooling.
Oh, wow.
And so he was going to school in college when I went to work there. And I ran into him and we talked. And it was always about, me wanting to go back to school and jump back into it, just, take a class or two, get your feet wet. And, just never would happen. And so he graduated from Middle College, applied, got accepted at UT in Austin.
Okay.
Took off. 2 years later, I'm still working at Middle College.
Yeah.
He comes in, I run into him. We're talking, and he says, I graduated bachelor's degree from University of Texas, political science, and I got applied and was accepted to UT Law School.
Oh, nice.
And I thought, if this guy can do it.
Yeah.
And that was really kind of what lit the fire.
Nice.
And again, I knew by now that I could take school and the college would pay. So jumped into it, not really knowing what I wanted to do. And I had met and become friends with the director of what they call the ADAC program, the counseling program.
Okay.
And one day talking, he said, "Hey, so I understand you're taking classes." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "So what do you want to do when you grow up?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, I had taken a criminal justice course, paralegal course, a couple of basics. It just wasn't fitting. I didn't want to, while I wanted to do some kind of service or helping field, I didn't want nursing, just didn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
Physical therapy or respiratory therapy, none of that really. And so Dr. Bruce, suggested that recommended that I take the introduction course. And I thought, wow. And so when I went to register again for the following semester, I'm going through the catalog, and it seemed like as I was flipping through the pages, trying to figure out what to do, that ADAC course just it seemed like it jumped from page to page on me. Okay, is this some kind of sign?
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, what the heck? And signed up for the introduction course and fell in love with it, basically.
Cool.
The idea of helping other people who I could relate to, in a large way. And as they say, the rest is history. Just went from there.
Yeah.
Went to work. My first assignment, if you will, I took a job with a facility or an organization called the program, the facility was called Project Proud. It was an adolescent facility that treated teenagers, 13 to 18-year-olds.
Oh, wow.
It was a co-ed facility,
Mm-hmm.
16 beds. It was a residential facility. They lived there.
Oh, that's good.
And co-ed, 8 girls, 8 boys.
Mm-hmm.
And I always felt and wanted to, because I had done a lot of youth work in the church for
Mm-hmm.
years and years, that I wanted to work with kids, with teenagers,
Yeah.
juveniles. And that 1 year that I was at Project Proud
Mm-hmm.
helped me to realize that teenagers was not my area. Those guys
That's
are
it.
dangerous.
Yeah.
Teenagers are dangerous. You know,
Okay.
they know all the rules. They know the rules better than you do. They're very challenging. They get in your face. And again, we're talking about juvenile kids here, kids that are in trouble with the law.
Okay.
And yeah, very, very aggressive, the young ladies. And
Wow.
it was so rough for me, to the point where I questioned whether, did I really get into the right field here?
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough that the facility that I worked for, Permian Basin Community Centers there in Midland,
Mm-hmm.
they also had adult facilities, and it's a big organization. And the director of the program, the overall substance abuse program, had called me and said, "Hey, I've got a place for you over here at the adult facility,"
Mm-hmm.
which was also co-ed. And of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, man, if I couldn't handle these kids,
Oh, okay.
am I going to be able to handle these adults?
Yeah.
Very, very different. I come to find out, very,
Really?
very, very different. And so I started in the residence, working with the people that were there in the residence. It was a 30-day program. And after about 2 weeks, they initially I saw it as a demotion, but it was actually a promotion.
Okay.
They moved me, or gave me the position of the outpatient program, which was clients that had already been there, left, and they would come back once a week for groups and individual sessions.
Yeah.
And very, very quickly, I started to realize that I could do this, that I could be good at it,
Nice.
and that I was going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I did, and I was, not to toot my own horn here, but I was very good at it.
Well, that's good.
And I think the fact that I liked doing it made it, easy for me to do it, and it made me good at it.
Yeah. Do you think the adults were at just a different point in life? They're like, I don't need to prove anything. Like, I just need help.
Well, I think once you get to the adult phase, yeah, they've kind of have been beat up a little bit more with life and through their struggle with the addiction or the drugs and stuff.
Okay.
Whereas the kids, they're still very cocky and strong, and think they can whip the world, and what they're going through or what they're dealing with, they don't realize. They don't understand the illness at that point.
Okay.
Some probably don't care, and so there's a lot of stuff that's going on. Whereas with the adults, while they're still struggling with the addiction and they're still struggling with the whole issue, they know they have a better understanding as to why they got involved in drugs, what their issues are, what their struggle is, why they continue to use drugs. Stuff like that.
A little more self-reflection.
Yes.
I want to go back a little bit. So your degree is in counseling, but what is the degree actually called?
Well, I have two. The only thing I got was 2 associates degree.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But one of the associates was in applied science, ADAC, or alcohol drug.
Oh, okay. ADAC. Yeah. Okay. And then the other one, is the other one related?
No, the other one was just a general studies.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Back in my day, or back in the days when I got into the field, you could you could do as little as just a certificate,
Oh, wow.
which was a 12 course. When you get into the ADEC program, in those days, you were only required to do, all you needed was the certificate, which was to take what they call the 12 core functions of counseling.
Okay.
Um, and it was 12 classes, and then you would get your certificate and you go to work.
Hmm.
Um, I I was advised in those days to seek my associates, and even further,
Okay.
the more credentials you have, the more you can do.
Yeah.
And obviously, from a financial standpoint or salary standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
the more credentials you have behind your name, the more you qualify for.
Yeah.
And so I decided to pursue, to start with my associates. The plan was to go after my what they call LPC, licensed professional counselor.
Oh, okay.
Um, I got my associates, got my license,
Yeah.
which is part of the associates. And to get your license, you got to do 4,000 hours of internship, which is 2 years of internship.
Oh, nice.
And so I got through all of that, got my license, and I was already working.
Yeah.
In those days, you could do half of the 12 core functions,
Mm-hmm.
and you could apply for a internship license. You can go to
I'll
work.
do it
Yeah,
simultaneously.
yeah, and you can go to work. The only thing with the internship is that you have to be supervised. In those days,
Yeah.
there had to be, as long as there was a licensed counselor on the premises
Mm.
or on the facility or wherever you were, you could do whatever.
Oh, nice.
See clients, see, without a counselor there, you weren't allowed to see clients in any way.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it. You couldn't do individuals. You couldn't do groups.
Yeah.
You could go do paperwork, whatever, things like that, but you couldn't see clients.
Yeah.
And so, of course, by the time I got my license, I had already been working a year and a half or so. But once I started working and got into it, just you know all the way, the plan again, as I said, was to go back to school.
Yeah.
And to go back to school and get that LPC, which is an LPC is really like an equivalent of a master's degree
Oh,
in the
wow.
field.
Okay.
Never had time.
Okay.
Was always working.
Yeah.
And I eventually, through the years, got to a point where, I was running programs. I eventually started my own practices, and I wasn't going to pursuing or obtaining the LPC wasn't going to benefit me in any way. I was already making top dollar.
Yeah.
I was, and with the LCDC, you can really, counsel in any area as long as it's kind of alcohol, drug related,
Okay.
family, sexual assault, anger, violence, all these, as
Oh, okay.
long as you can go back and say, okay, that you did
It
those
stems
things,
from.
you have an anger issue because of your drinking and drugging issue.
Okay. Yeah. Well, interesting. And so how old were you whenever your construction work kind of slowed down and then you transitioned?
Well, the last year that I billed, I was about 33.
Oh, so you're transitioning in your mid 30s.
And I went to school at 33, 34.
Okay.
Yeah. I billed for about 17, 18 years.
Okay.
In different, from cement work to trim work to framing to all construction areas.
Oh, nice.
Phases.
Yeah.
Did a little bit of all of it, mainly framing and woodwork.
Yeah.
But again, as I said, I always wanted to get into some kind of helping field, and having surrendered my life in those days and become a Christian, that was even more. It affected even me even more to get into some kind of service field, some kind of practice, some kind of helping field and stuff.
Yeah.
I wanted to do more than just build a house. House, you build a house, one or two, you build one or two houses, or you work on
Yeah.
building one or two houses. It's like a puzzle. They go up the same way.
Yeah.
And so after a while,
It's
you know,
tedious.
you're
Yeah.
just working and making money. There's really no,
No impact.
it's not the same with working with an individual where in time you start seeing their progress and
Yeah.
their growth and their, stuff. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that way about inspecting. I left teaching. Now I'm an inspector, and I'm like, I
yeah.
kind of miss teaching. Because, yeah, with inspections, they call you, you inspect the house, they buy the house, and then that's it. You don't
That's
hear
it.
from them
Yeah.
again. And then with teaching, like now I have students that now they're having kids, they're graduating from I have a student that
Right.
started a restaurant, and you build those relationships, and that's cool. It's cool to
Well,
see that.
the thing about it is that in the long haul, it's like back in the day with youth work, you
Mm.
know, met a lot of uh, members and brothers and sisters in the church today
Mm-hmm.
that are now like you. You've grown up. You've got your family.
Yeah.
You've got teenagers.
Yeah.
Some of the ones that I know, their
Yeah.
kids are already married and
Wow.
stuff, and so
Yeah.
you see, and you see these kids, adults now, and that in some way or the other, you had something to do with their
Yeah.
spiritual growth,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
stuff. And so, as a counselor, when I would run into ex-clients that have been with me,
Yeah.
and they're doing well, they're succeeding, they've gotten jobs, they've made amends with their families, their relationships with wives, et cetera. And I played a role in that.
Yeah.
I had something to do with their progress and
Yeah.
their success, their well-being now,
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
success. So
Yeah.
that was really the payoff,
Yeah.
when you run into, you could, in my field, on any given day, you could have a great day,
Mm-hmm.
or you could just have a horrible day.
Yeah.
It just depends. Or you could have a great morning and have a bad afternoon, or
Yeah.
you just never knew.
Yeah.
And I always got to the office with a plan, but 2 minutes into the office, that plan would go out the window. You just never knew. Especially when you work in residential,
Okay.
because clients are just bombarding you. They're just,
Mm.
you put a sign on the door, session, session. I mean, therapy
Yeah.
session,
Like do
and they're
not
knocking
disturb.
on you, and they're knocking on your door. It's like, you not see the sign. So, but you could have a bad day, and it always seemed to work for me anyway. That almost it seemed like clockwork. At the end of the day, you just have had one of those days from hell, really.
Okay.
And you're wondering, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? You question yourself.
Yeah.
And somebody would walk in, or somebody would call and just say, "Hey, Mr. Mancha, just want to tell you thank you, man." Or, "Hey, Mr. Mancha, hey, I took your advice, and I did, this, and it's working out, or
That's
this is
good.
happening, something positive."
Yeah.
And it would like, okay, it just kind of remind you
Yeah.
why you were doing what you were doing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's talk about your data, because and I know you mentioned you worked for someone and you had your own.
mhm.
Let's talk first about the residential. So what does your day-to-day look like? Because they live there,
Mhm.
but I'm assuming you come in
Mhm.
in the morning, you have your hours, and then you leave.
Right.
So what does that look like if I work for a residential place?
Well, it's like I stated, in any given day,
Mm-hmm.
you just don't know,
Okay.
because in the substance abuse field, especially in the residential field, you're dealing with clients who, clients become very, very needy,
Okay.
and they also become very complacent. They become very lazy, and especially if you're one of those kind of counselors who tends to do everything for them, you know.
Okay.
And I knew those, I know those kind of counselors that did everything from helping them obtain their license, social security cards, even helping them look for work.
Mm-hmm.
I did those things, but I would direct them. Okay, you need to call these people, and you do this, you need to do that.
Mhm.
I know counselors that would call directly and do the
Mhm.
footwork for them.
Yeah.
And I would have discussions with colleagues and say, you're not helping, you're kind of enabling.
Yeah.
It's good to give them, okay, you call here, go there, go do this, point them in the right direction. Give them the phone numbers, do these things, but don't do it for them,
Yeah.
because you're making them, very, very needy, and in so many ways you're enabling.
Yeah.
And so, again, clients could become very, very needy, and there was a lot of things that just, they would come in, hey, Mr. Mancha, and it was like, hey, guy, it's as simple as picking up the phone and making a phone call.
Yeah.
It's as simple as asking for a pass and going to this place, applying for a job, you know.
Okay.
And most facilities that I worked for in the residentials, they had computers that the clients could use for putting together resumes,
Yeah.
applying to jobs, um, doing this stuff, obtaining their license, making appointments, stuff. We had phones for them, that they could use to make calls and whatever. Um, but a lot of these clients just simply wouldn't use them.
Mm.
And then, of course, you had your clients that, like me, were old school and are not technically
Savvy.
just savvy.
Tech savvy. Yeah.
And again, this is where you got involved. You help them out. Okay, you do this, and you help them
Mm.
maneuver and navigate through the computers and what
Yeah.
have you. Um, but a lot of them just didn't want to do it. They don't want to do the footwork.
Mm.
And so again, because they became so needy, yeah, that's where a lot of times you run into issues. And because I would really, in so many ways, demand, no, get off your butt, get on the computer, do what you got to do,
Yeah.
take care of your business.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it for you. I've
Yeah.
already showed you how, where.
Mhm.
But again, with residential individuals, you're helping them because a lot of them have come out of the corrections facilities, right?
Oh, okay.
And so you're helping them assimilate back into society,
Okay.
find a job. They have in most of the TC therapeutic programs that I work with through the state, they were at the residences for 90 days. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So they had 90 days to get a job, save some money, get a place to live if they didn't have one, if they were able to obtain some kind of transportation, so forth and so forth. 90 days, they're released out into the community.
Okay.
And then they go into the outpatient services. And that's when they come back once a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the push, But a lot of them would focus so much on just going to work,
Mm-hmm.
That, they wouldn't take care of the other things that they need to take care of.
Mm.
And so, and again, you're dealing with individuals who have gotten accustomed, in many cases, have gotten accustomed to the state taking care of them,
Mm.
providing their foods, their housing, et cetera, and just do not know how to. In the counseling field, there was a term that was used always: learning to live life on life's terms.
Okay.
Okay. And I would use that a lot with the clients. Learning to live life on life's terms means basically life requires us to get a job, to work, to earn our living, to pay rent, to buy groceries, to pay bills. Living life on life's terms. That's what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
You don't work, you don't eat.
Yeah.
You don't work, you don't have a place to live.
Okay.
And so I would push that on a lot of them. You have to learn to live life on life's terms.
Mm-hmm.
And because a lot of these guys have been incarcerated, have been, under the corrections facility for the states, they don't learn that.
Yeah.
Or if they learned it, they forgot it, or they let it go, or they became very lazy, complacent about it. And so you have to push this back on them. You need to get out there. You need to do the work. You need to,
Yeah.
That made for a lot of aggravation with a lot of clients.
Okay.
And that created a lot of aggravation with the counselor or the relationship between the counselor and the client. So, in the middle of all of that, trying to assimilate them back into society, there's also therapy going on. There's
Okay.
also coming individuals who are discussing, you know, in that particular area of their therapy. I always focused on the why, why alcohol and drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I learned a long time ago that individuals who have addiction issues, and they could be drugs or eating disorders,
Mm-hmm.
sex, sexual dysfunctions and stuff,
Yeah.
gambling, all of those are addictions.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, the people that I worked, they chose drugs and alcohol. Um, I used to teach my clients and talk to my clients about, you drink and drug to medicate emotions, to change the way you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you drink 2 beers every evening when you get home to relax, you're changing the way you feel.
Yeah.
Whereas if you drink a 12-pack a day every day to forget about your father's abuse,
Mm-hmm.
you're changing the way you feel.
Yeah.
Can't get away from that, right?
Yeah.
Changing the way you feel. So I always approach the clients from the standpoint of why. We need to identify what is it that you carry here in your brain,
Yeah.
in your mind, in your emotions, in your feelings that caused you to have to medicate
Yeah.
to feel better. Okay.
Yeah.
So once you get into the outpatient side, now you're helping and dealing with the clients from the standpoint of they're at home, dealing with the wife, the children, the job, the bills, life.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a different approach to
Yeah.
the therapy, you know. And I always preferred outpatient because they would come in with, in the residence, it was usually the same kind of situations,
Okay.
right? Finding a job, place to live, uh, you know, the residents, now they're dealing with that crazy wife or that crazy husband or those bad kids
Yeah.
or, that boss who they would feel they're being
Mm-hmm.
taken advantage of or, manipulated or, just so they're dealing with the situations in their lives out
Yeah.
there. So it's a different approach when you come at it.
Yeah. So at the residency, it's a mix of transitioning them,
And treatment.
plus you're also doing one-on-one sessions.
Treatment, yes.
Okay.
That's why they're called in the state. The residences are called TTC,
Okay.
therapeutical treatment facilities.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, therapeutical transition facilities,
Oh.
because you're providing therapy,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also helping them to transition back out into society.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
And then after, so you did the youth, you did the adult, and then how long did it take for you to start your own practice?
about 7 years.
Okay.
I think. Yeah, I was in residence or work for facilities, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
for about 7 years, and eventually ventured out. And in both, I had two for years and years. I had two practices.
Okay.
I had one what I call the full time practice, and then I had a part time practice that I worked
Okay.
on weekends usually.
Mm-hmm.
In both cases, I had a partner, and so it really is, and just for incoming counselors or individuals who may want to go into the field. We were told for years and years that with just an LCDC, it was very difficult to hang your own shingles or start your own practice, which is not true.
Okay.
You just have to go through the process of obtaining contracts at the state or the feds or whoever, which those are the obtaining the contracts is not as difficult as putting together the contract.
Okay.
I remember the first state contract that I put together. The whole contract was probably about 1.5 inches thick. Yeah, and it took us a year.
A year?
A year to put it
to
together.
put one contract?
Yeah.
Wow.
And fortunately, I had I had an individual with the state
Mm-hmm.
who I could call, because because I was working full time,
Mm-hmm.
and then in the evenings I would work on the contract.
Mm-hmm.
And I had his personal number where I would call him and say, "Hey, what do I do here?
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
asking me this. What is it that they want?
Yeah.
Well, they want this, this,
Oh,
this.
that's nice.
Okay, bye, bye."
Yeah.
And then I don't know. We emailed the contract to them 7, 8 times in that year. Send it to them.
Yeah.
They would review it. They mark it with a red marker. Send it back to us.
Oh,
You
wow.
need to do this, 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 this.
Yeah.
Took a whole year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
And
what work are you doing while you're trying to get that contract? What other work is available?
Well, at the time, we also had a federal contract,
Okay.
which was easier. We started with a federal contract. My first practice, we started with a federal contract,
Mm-hmm.
which are easier to obtain.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much paperwork, not as much requirements, all this stuff. So they were easier to obtain.
Okay.
And then we also had what we call self-pay or walk-ins, individuals who called on their own and said, "Hey," And so, once we got the state, we took off.
Oh, nice.
With the feds and the walk-ins, we were paying the bills,
Mm-hmm.
if you will.
Yeah.
But once we got the state,
Yeah.
and then we got the first federal contract that we had was called it was dealing with probationers, or again convicts that come out of prison.
Mm-hmm.
But then we got what they call it, the FBOP, the Federal Bureau of Prisons. That was a whole different level.
Okay.
And so once we got the state and that second contract with the feds,
Mm-hmm.
we took off.
Nice.
It was nonstop.
Yeah. And what inspired you to start your own, and how difficult was that transition?
Well, I've never liked working for someone
Okay.
or having a boss.
Yeah.
And when you work for a facility, you have a director, and then you have a clinical supervisor, and then maybe a supervisor. So you got 2 or 3 bosses.
Yeah.
And that created a lot of conflict because the supervisor would tell you one thing, and then your clinical supervisor calls you in and shoos you out because that's not what you're supposed to be doing. And then you have it, and then
you're like, well, he said,
now you're with the director because I was told to do this, and so too many chiefs, if you will. And so you put up with it, you dealt with it because that was kind of the nature of the beast. But after a while, it was like, hey, wait a minute, After we started researching, me and the first partner that I had with the full-time practice started researching and kind of looking into it, what we needed to do. And it is a process because you'll have to, one, get the contract. But before you can get a contract, you got to have a facility.
Yeah.
And then the facility has to be handicap accessible and all these requirements that the city requires you and then the state requires you. And you got to have all of that before you even know you have a contract or not. So it's a pain and it's a hassle in the process. But once you get your first contract, and you get a certificate of occupancy from the city, then you're off, man. You're off to the races.
And these contracts, are they like yearly?
Well,
how often are they renewed?
The federal was every 3 years.
Okay.
Both of them. But the state was a 10-year contract.
Oh, wow.
And you really just got to kind of mess things up, man, for them to take those contracts from you. You really just got to be bad at it.
Okay.
Or you got to be caught at some kind of, you're doing some, because it's really easy to commit fraud. It's really easy to manipulate those things.
Okay. Say you're doing something, but you're not really.
And so as long as you're abiding by the rules and doing what you're supposed to, and not, not being criminal at it, you'll get wrote up for, your charts are insufficient, or you don't have any charts that are required.
Yeah.
You don't have certain things in the facility that you're required required to have. And you have monitors that come in and they monitor you. That was another thing that was could be a pain because those monitors would come in.
Like an audit
Yeah.
type thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And they would come in. The feds would come in once every 6 months or so.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And just kind of check things out. And they were really good about it. And whatever they needed, say, hey, we need to take care of this. The state come in sometimes once a month.
Oh, wow.
And, you had an auditor or a monitor that came in for a year, and then maybe he was transferred with somewhere else. You get a new monitor. He comes in, now he's questioning, why are you doing this? Well, the last guy, this is what he told us to do. So it was that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I used to mess with the auditors whenever we got a new one, and they'd go and usually it was 3 days. They were there 3 days.
Oh, wow.
Because they went through your charts, your files, your finances, your bookkeeping. They looked at, they talked to clients, they interviewed clients, they did all that stuff. And so you had an incoming meeting where you sat down and this is what we're looking at. And then they would have a closing meeting. This is what we found.
Yeah.
We need you to correct this. And I would always, at the end, walking them out the door, I would say, oh, hey, wait, but by the way, before you leave, can I ask you a question? He says, yeah, what's up? And I would say, hey, so is there a department or an agency in Austin that they just sit around and look for things to hassle people? And they would look at me and it's like, no. I said, well, I just wondered, man, because it seems like every time we get a new auditor, they come in with new different stuff,
Yeah.
And so, they would kind of, my partner would say, why do you do that? I just give them a tap.
That's funny. Was there any funding that you had to think about when transitioning to, okay, I work for someone, now I want to start my own? Was there any,
Well, again, like I said, you have to get your own facility.
Yeah.
So that means rent,
Mm-hmm.
bills, supplies, material, equipment, copiers, computers, desks, chairs, chairs for your group rooms.
Yeah. Paycheck for your family.
Payroll, payroll and taxes and all these things. So yeah, it to be honest, I don't remember, or I really can't never been able to put a number on what it was how much it was that I invested on my part. We started with with two small offices, and then we eventually had to go into a suite where we had several offices, 2 large group rooms.
Oh, nice.
A foyer or an entrance area.
Yeah.
And so we have to furnish all of that. We were renting copiers. We eventually bought copiers. We bought furniture. And we did well enough in the first couple of years where, we could invest. We made a little money this year. Let's buy this.
Okay. Yeah.
So we paid ourselves a paycheck. But there was a couple of years where we had bonuses and things like that that we would pay ourselves.
Yeah.
But for the most part, there was always something we needed to, because everything, you buy furniture, 2 or 3 years, you got to buy more. You buy computers, 2 or 3 years, you got to buy another.
Okay, yeah.
And so we were always having to put money back into the company and stuff. So, but we paid ourselves well, and there was a couple of years there where we had, I guess you could say, some profit sharing, some bonuses at the end of the year, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we paid ourselves a salary and just kind of reinvested the money back into the company,
Yeah.
We started with one office in Midland, and then we opened an office in San Angelo.
Okay.
So we had 2 offices going for the state.
How far apart are those locations?
100 miles, 112 miles,
Oh,
2 hours, hour and a half.
Okay.
So, and so.
Were you at one?
I was in Midland.
Okay.
I was in.
And then your partner went to San
Well,
Angelo,
we had.
or
She would be the one that would travel to San Angelo if there was issues that needed to be
okay.
taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
I pretty much stayed out of that and stuff.
Okay.
But we had counselors over there and staff over there and stuff that
Mm.
ran the facility and
Yeah.
stuff. So
Nice.
she focused on the federal side of the program or the business.
Mm-hmm.
I focused on the state,
Okay.
and then we had a young man in San Angelo in San Angelo. All we had was state. There was no federal program.
Yeah.
So he focused on that over there. So we had it pretty well organized and running pretty good, really good. You know.
Yeah. And what I have two questions. For the partnership, did y'all lay out was there like a contract, or kind of, I'm in charge of this, you're in charge of this, these are our boundaries? How was that?
There was no. We never did because I'd known this person for several years now,
Okay.
and I always felt that she was trustworthy and
Mm-hmm.
we trusted each other. Everything was pretty much operated on word of mouth.
Okay.
You know, our
Yeah.
our agreement was verbal,
Mm-hmm.
and in 15 years that we were together, there was never any
That's
question
good.
or doubt. You know, we sat down, we looked at the books quarterly. We knew what was coming in, what was going on, what we were
Yeah.
doing with it, you know, stuff. Um, and then her daughter was the one who was the office manager that ran the office.
Oh,
You
okay.
know, she took care of payroll and all those kind of things. And so um, there was, I never felt a need to have anything in
Yeah.
writing. No, we never did. Really. You know, it was just everything was word of mouth. We knew what was going on. I knew what was coming in, what was going on. She knew.
Yeah.
You know,
Good.
and we never had, as far as the finances or the business side of the business, we never had any issues.
Okay.
Um,
Did y'all have a bookkeeper, accountant, or was
she
that all in house?
her daughter took care of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but again, as far as the business side,
Mm-hmm.
we never had any issues. As far as the treatment side, yeah, we
There were disagreements.
we would kind of go at it at time from time because maybe she felt I was being a little bit too aggressive with the client, or my approach of certain things,
Okay.
or maybe I felt she was being too easy or kind of cuddly in the clients.
Yeah.
She was a very, very, very good person.
Yeah.
And had a really, really good heart.
Mm-hmm.
Where I tended to be a little bit more assertive.
Mm-hmm.
And like we were talking earlier, I need you to do this, and you need to step up, and you need to take care of your business. You need to do the footwork here. I'm not gonna do this for you and stuff. So we had a different approach to our therapy.
And did y'all ever share clients, or you had your clients, she had hers?
Yeah, we would oftentimes we would sit together in groups.
Okay.
And work together with the group. Sometimes we would sit together with one client and maybe consult together with the client. We would obviously consult a lot of times about different clients. You know, there was times where we would transfer clients where it was like, hey, I'm not getting anywhere with him, and obviously him and I have an issue, or the client,
he's just not responding well.
Either I was too aggressive, too strong, or she was too easy, and
they needed the other.
They needed one needed the loving, the other one needed the aggression, the hard individual, stuff. So we would transfer. Why don't you take him on your caseload for a while and see what he does, stuff. So
smart.
Yeah, we worked together in that area, but there were oftentimes differences of opinion as to how we should approach a certain client, or how we should deal with a certain client, or stuff. Yeah,
kind of like parents.
Yeah.
Me and my wife have those issues.
Because you really, in a sort of way of speaking, you really were dealing with, um, in treatment, we often talked about, and one of the things that I learned in going through school
Mm-hmm.
was that with a lot of people who are in addiction of different kinds,
Mm-hmm.
that when at the point in their lives when they started using drugs, be it 12, 13, 15, 18, 20, 30, however old, especially with young kids, they started smoking weed at 13,
Mm-hmm.
their mental growth and emotional growth would be stunted at that point.
Okay.
All right. So at 35 years of age, you've got a 35-year-old man in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
But in many cases,
Yeah.
you would find that you're emotionally and mentally, behavioral.
Yeah.
You would find that I'm dealing with a 13-year-old here. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was
So,
it was difficult because you were literally in many cases dealing with grown adults
mm-hmm.
who threw tantrums, who
Wow.
behaved like little children in many cases. Not all of them,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
many cases, yes.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
What the other question I had earlier was, would you recommend someone work for a company before going out on their own to kind of, you know,
Yeah.
learn certain things? Or is it possible to just get your license and start and kind of learn on the
Well,
kind of make your mistakes on your own?
I think a lot of that would be dependent on the individual.
Okay.
Could you get your license and get a contract and go off on your own immediately? Yeah, there's people who could do that, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure. But my advice would always be get your feet wet, get some
Mm-hmm.
experience under you, both from a therapeutical or
Mm-hmm.
the therapy, but also from the business side.
Okay.
Get to know how the state operates or how the feds operate,
Mm-hmm.
or just the business in general. You know, um, because when you're in business for yourself, um, it's not as simple as let's rent a building
Yeah.
or a place
Mm.
and put some chairs in it and let's
And
go.
it's, yeah.
You'd be surprised the things that come up that you have, uh, just simple as paper clips,
Yeah.
paper,
Yeah.
coffee,
Mm-hmm.
these things add up,
Yeah.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
from, you could be making a $300 a month payment on a copier and you're spending $50 a month on coffee.
Yeah.
It adds up.
Yeah.
And when you go into it kind of blinded like that, yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, whoa.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to figure out, okay, and from a business standpoint, you have to know that, okay, the state pays so much per client,
Mm-hmm.
so much per individual session per client, so
Yeah.
much per individual session per group.
Okay.
How many clients you got to have?
Mm.
My rent is this. You got to know the
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
rent is this. My overhead is this.
Yeah.
My income financially is going to be this.
Mm-hmm.
Can we pay payroll?
Yeah.
Can I pay the bills?
Sustainable. Yeah.
The idea I'm going to come into it and I'm going to make a profit this first year. It may be 4 or 5 years before you make a profit. You'll make a paycheck,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But an actual profit at the end of the year and say, hey, I made $20,000 this year.
Yeah.
After everything,
Yeah.
you may not see anything like that. You may not ever see anything like that. It just depends on your business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would always advise, hey, get your feet wet,
Yeah.
know what you're getting into,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with the state,
Yeah.
what they require you, what they demand, because the state is now I'm born and raised in Texas, all right?
Mm-hmm.
But the state of Texas does not like paying you money. Okay.
Okay.
And so to get them to pay you what they owe you, yeah, it's a hassle.
Okay.
But they're really, really quick, at least in my field,
Mm-hmm.
they were really, really quick to sanction us for our files were incorrect, or this was incorrect, or this wasn't a compliance, or this, it's all about compliances.
Yeah.
They're really, really quick to financially sanction you, and stuff. And so that's another thing that you had to deal with.
Wow.
And so, yeah, what are the rules? What can you do? And it's really, really easy to get yourself into trouble from a financial standpoint, but also from dealing with the clients, because clients get upset at you, they get angry at you, they get feelings of some kind with you, and they're instructed to write grievances. And some clients, that's all they do, is write grievances. Other clients could care less.
And that grievance, does it go to the state?
If you're working for a facility, the way it usually works is they write a grievance and they put it in a grievance box. The director of the facility will take those grievances, look them over, and then they'll call you in and say, okay, boom, 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 investigate. And if they, it's found that, you did what they complained that you did, then they're going to discipline you in some way.
Yeah.
And that a lot of that depends on the facilities.
Yeah. And when you had your own practice, was there a system like that, or they would have grievances?
Yeah. The client will file a grievance, put it in a box. Either depending if the grievance was gone on me, my partner would look at it, and if it was severe, if it was a serious issue, let's say I slapped the client over the head, that's an assault charge.
Yeah.
She has to, by law, report it to the state.
Okay.
If it was just as simple as because again, the facility can also grant grievances against you, not just the clients. My director or my supervisor checks my files, and she's already written me up because my files are lacking this, that, or the other, and I don't take care of it. Next audit they do, they see the same thing. So now they're going to write me up.
Yeah.
All right. And either can be taken care of in the facility, or it can be reported to the state. It just depends on the severity of the grievance, stuff. So,
okay.
And yeah, you don't want the state coming in. One of the things that I found with grievances, and I've had a few through the years, was that when the state gets involved, they don't come in with an attitude of let's investigate, see what we find. Okay. They kind of come in with the attitude of you did it, and you're kind of guilty before you even.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the approach that they take. I was. They wrote. There was a grievance that was sent to Austin. At this time, I was still working for a facility.
Yeah.
And the grievance claimed that I had become sexually involved with, or that I was sexually involved with some of the clients. Oh. At the time, I was supervising a relapse facility, 16 beds, all men. When the investigator came down from Austin, the first thing he said to me, without even shaking my hand, I was introduced to him, and it was me and my supervisor, who was also under the same grievance. And she had been accused of cussing and had put her hands, the grievance stated that she grabbed the client by the arm and kind of shook him and stuff. But when he walks in, and this was going on in the director's office, walked in, they introduced me to him. Of course, I extended my hand out to him. Yeah. I really don't know what this is about.
Yeah.
Without shaking my hand, he looks at me and he says, looks like we got you, boy. And You know, again, I'm a 50-year-old grown man here. You know, like, excuse me.
Wow.
But then it turns out that he had done some investigating. The address that was on the grievance, where he went to look for this particular client, he was told at this place by the people that lived there that they had been living in this home for like 20 years, and nobody by that name lived at that place. Phone number was an unlist was a number that had never been used. Yeah, it didn't exist. The witnesses that this person, they didn't exist. So my question to the guy was, so if there's no evidence of any of this ever happening, why are you here investigating? Why? You know, of course, I really wanted to go back to the issue of "We got you, boy."
Yeah.
But my director said,
Oh, yeah.
"Let it go." You know? So it was,
Yeah.
and then some grievances were just kind of like, you know, well, he said I was stupid, or you know, and the question, instead of, you know, it may have been a whole different, took the comment out of context, and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
you just never knew.
Yeah. Wow.
But I had not been written up, God, 15, 16 years.
Oh, wow.
Because I didn't treat my clients that way.
Yeah.
I didn't say things like, are you stupid? You know, or
Yeah.
you know, or ask questions like, what's the matter with you?
Yeah.
You know, I didn't insult them. You know, I didn't, I didn't raise my voice at them. You know, I mean, I was assertive. I would say, hey,
Yeah. Yeah.
pay attention to how you're thinking. Are you listening to yourself? You know, talk. But things like that. But
Yeah.
to insult them, to put my hands on them, no.
Yep.
So, man, I had not been. What my clients would say about me was that I was going to tell you how it was.
Yeah.
And with all due respect, Mr. Mike's going to tell you how it is. He's just going to tell you how it is.
Yeah.
And but it was done in a respectful manner. It was done, without insulting.
Yeah.
Stuff. So
That's
yeah,
good.
I hadn't been written up in a long time, 15, 16.
Were there
maybe longer.
Were there any early mistakes you made when it came to?
The one mistake that I think I made as a very rookie counselor, I had just gone from, as I was telling you earlier, I went from the teenage facility to the adult facility.
Okay.
And when I walked into the door, because I was a month late from the time I was supposed to be there,
Okay.
they actually hailed me at the teenage facility for a month until they hired someone to take my place.
Oh, okay.
And so when I eventually showed up at the adult facility, there was a man, David was his name, who was the supervisor. And he's actually waiting for me at the door. And he's got about 9 charts in his hand.
Oh.
And again, mind you, I'm still an intern at this time.
Okay.
And he gives me these 9, hey, Ray, how you doing? He gives me these 9 charts. He says, all right, let's see what you're made out of,
Yeah.
And I spent the better part of that morning looking for a place to sit down, an office.
Okay.
That was the one thing that was lacking in that facility, office space. Anyway, I finally got settled in, and about 3 days or so later, I got this one client who came in. New client that come in, just got off the van, and he'd been there about a week. And so the first week that they were there, they had to stay in the facility for 72 hours, get assimilated to the facility, this and that. And finally, after 3 hours, they would get a pass to go out and look for work. Okay. Well, within a week, he relapsed. He ended up going back out and using. And that just kind of freaked me out. Just like, man, what did I do? What should I have done? Did I not approach him right? and it just, I just took it upon myself. And David came in my office one afternoon, and he says, "What's going on?" I said, "Man, this client, he relapsed, man." And so I'm dropping all of this on him. I don't know what I did, and I should have. And he said, "No, no, 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 no." He said, "Are you crazy?" He said, "You can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't, you can't take responsibility like that for these clients. They're adults. You do the best you can. If they're going to, what they do, they're going to do because they choose to do.
Yeah.
If they choose to get sober, stay sober, it's because they choose to.
Yeah.
If they choose to go back out, it's because they choose. It's their choice. You can't take responsibility for that."
Yeah.
He said, "Man, you're crazy. So you'll go crazy if you do this with every client."
Yeah.
That was probably the biggest, the first time that I felt, I dropped the ball here. I failed. I could have done better.
Yeah.
And from that point forward, it was like, and through the years, there was probably hundreds of clients that relapsed and went back, and stuff. Some who repeated came in, relapsed. They would send them back to the facilities. They come back 2 or 3 times. And it's like, it's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
Relapse is inevitable in treatment. I mean, it's not a question of will you, it's when. Yeah. Because I would say that 10 out of 10 clients that come into treatment will relapse once, twice, maybe more. Some of them can come in the first time and they get it. They get it. They wake up. Some could take 2, 3, 4 times.
Wow.
Unfortunately, some never do.
Really?
The revisitism, the repeat, the relapse is so high in treatment. It is so high.
Wow. Is that discouraging?
If you let it.
Or have you learned to?
If you let it, you learn to accept that it is what it is.
Yeah.
That's the nature of the beast. That's part of, some counselors, and I was not one of those counselors. Some counselors will make the statement that relapse is part of recovery.
Okay.
And I always felt that was like a get out of jail free
like a
card.
cop out, yeah.
Yeah. No. Will you relapse? The odds are not in. Yeah. The odds are against you. Yes. But
it doesn't have to be part of the process.
But you don't have to relapse because I've had clients that didn't, never did. Like I said, they went in, they got it the first time.
Yeah.
They made the changes necessary. They did the therapy. They worked through it, and have been able to maintain their sobriety, stay sober, and have lived on, and gone on to live, good, prosperous lives.
Yeah.
And like I said, there's others that in and out, in and out, in and out, and never do.
Oh.
Unfortunately.
So the two that I've heard you say, the two people, I'll call them clients, are people coming out of the correctional facilities and then walk-ins. Is there any other flow of clients?
Family.
Oh, well, family brings them in.
Family comes in with them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I always encourage family sessions, especially with the criminal justice clients or the guys that came in from the systems. I always encourage session with wife, children, mom, dad, all of them. I've had family sessions with 15, 16 members, brothers, sisters, mom, dad, wife, kids. Yeah. Big group.
Yeah.
Or I've had sessions with the client and the wife, or client and son, or client and daughter, or client and husband, whoever. Yeah. Employers, bosses, best friends, just maybe someone that they felt they needed to make amends to, didn't know how, to say, hey, I'm sorry, this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
Didn't know how to do it. So they would say, hey, will you help me with this? Can I bring him in? And yeah, sure, bring him in. The unfortunate and sad thing about, as far as, like especially in treatment or in substance abuse, is that, we it's taught, and it's something that you address, in that in many, many cases, the family members of the addict or abuser uh, are just as sick, if not sicker, than the addict themselves.
Okay.
Because they've had to deal with the abuser. They've had to go. And so that's why it was always recommended. It was I recommended. I didn't demand it, but I recommended AA support groups, Celebrate Recovery, these things.
Yeah.
Not only for themselves, but for their families. And especially in AA has Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, but they also have what they call Al-Anon, which was AA meetings for the family members, spouses especially, parents. They also had Alateen for teenagers, teenage children, little children, because they all, having lived and dealt with the abuser, they all have their issues, stuff. There is a it's called an enmeshed system, and that is when you have, say, an alcoholic in the family, but nobody in the family talks about it, and outside of the house to the rest of the world, if you will, everything's great. All right.
Yeah.
But behind closed doors in the house, there are these issues, but the family doesn't talk about it. And that creates an enormous amount of issues and problems that as the kids start to grow up, these issues and problems start to manifest themselves in certain behaviors. Again, alcohol, drug use in the kids, delinquent behavior, skipping school, promiscuous behavior, violence, aggression, fights, all these things. It starts, manifesting themselves. So it's very, very important to get the family in, and that's probably the one place where I would have family members walk out just mad at me, because I made that statement one time in a group, because they could do individual sessions, all right, or family individual sessions, just the family, or they could bring family members to the groups that they wanted. I had one client who brought his wife, and he was a serious alcoholic, and I made the comment of family members of the abusers, in many cases, are just as sick, if not sicker. And it was like, I'm not sick, and there's nothing wrong with me. And she got really ticked off. She got him and walked out.
Yeah.
Fortunately, a couple of days later, she called me on the phone. And, can you tell me why you made that statement? So, well, first of all, the statement was in general. I didn't throw it at you. It hit you on the head. Sorry. The statement was in general.
Yeah.
And so I, shared with her, this and this and this and this. And these are the issues. And this is what happens a lot of times.
Yeah.
And she asked for, private sessions,
That's good.
And then so so I was seeing her and I was seeing him, and then we were doing family sessions together, stuff. Unfortunately, it didn't end with a happy ending. He eventually passed away of cirrhosis of the liver and stuff. But that's just one of the cases. I had a lot of cases like that where, and that's usually the people that would get mad at me, family members.
Oh, interesting.
Or maybe I didn't release them from the treatment when they thought they should be released. Um, the TC program for the state, when they did outpatient services, the program was 9 months. They come back for 9 months. And so when they would get there, we would obviously do an assessment and evaluation assessment, whatever. And in the course of the assessment, I would say, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is what you're going to do, blah, blah, blah. And I'd say, you're here for, the state gives you a leeway of 6 to 9 months that you can have them in treatment. When we started on our own practice, we knew from experience that when you tell a client, you're going to be here 6 to 9 months, all right, that about 4.5, 5 months, you're going to let me go at 6 months? You're going to let me go at 6 months, And so they would defocus immediately because their focus now is getting out. And so we decided, across the board, everybody, 9 months, all right. And so initially when I was working for facilities and we would 6 to 9 months, maybe I released this guy at 6 months and this guy would keep for 8 months. And it was like, why did you let, he says that you let another guy go at 6 months. How come you're not releasing my husband? And I had those kind of issues. I didn't care. But so when we started on our own, it was like across the board, 9 months. Nobody leaves here before, unless it was some kind of medical emergency of some kind, where the client it was dangerous for him to even be there. At one client had heart issues, and twice just dropped right in front of us in the group. I'd call the ambulance, taking. So those kind of individuals, after consultation with the state, would say, hey, we, it's medically, we need to, or if they transferred somewhere else. Okay. So.
And how would you find out if they relapse, if they're doing good, what accountability is set up outside of your sessions?
Well, it depends again on the facility.
Okay.
And of course, you're in correlation or in consultation or in cahoots, however you want to say it, with the parole department. Okay. Residents, we would test them on the premises. Okay. UA them, urinalysis. Outpatient, the parole officers would test them. Okay. And then they would notify Mr. Mancha, Lewis tested positive for alcohol or for pot use. And then, of course, there was consequences for that. And that could be anything from extending their stay, extending their, kind of intensify their treatment, Okay. Instead of 1 session a week, now it's 2 sessions a week. Instead of 1 group a week, now it's 2. Just kind of what they call intensive treatment or intensive therapy.
And the outpatient clients, are they ever drug tested?
Yes, like I said, the parole officers would drug test them. And so they would call me and say. But the other thing was that just visual, really? You could tell. And you get to know.
Sometimes they come in high or...
me being an ex, I could smell. I could, visually. From a behavioral to a physical. You start watching, he's losing weight. His eyes have resunken back into the sockets of their eyeballs into the sockets. Attitude, you got one guy that comes in, never says anything, never speaks. You got to kind of, hey, tell me something. And then all of a sudden, 1 week he walks in, he doesn't shut up. It's like, okay, dude, or he's always angry. He's just an angry dude. And then next week he's coming in and he's the most lovable. Hey, Mr. Mancha, how you doing? And like, okay, dude, what's going on? Or I'd have them fall out of their chairs, man. so stoned or whatever. And you can tell, but you're going to give them an opportunity. Maybe it's just me making an assumption. Let me, and no, 5 minutes in the group, pow, they'd fall out. So it was just kind of different ways of kind of going about it. You could smell them. And usually I would walk in. That's when I would become threatening, and I would walk in and say, "Okay, I'm gonna give you an opportunity." All right. And there may be 15, 20, 30 people in the group. Okay. And I would say, I'm gonna give you all an opportunity. All right.
Yeah.
Somebody had the audacity to get high before they walked in. All right. Now I'm gonna give that individual an opportunity to volunteer, come in my office. All right. And confess. You got 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, I'm calling the officer. If I call the parole officers, hey, we got, they would, 2 or 3 of them show up with UA kits and test them all. I never did that. I would threaten them with it. I never did that. But usually the culprit would, not just me, man, what's up, dude, man? Why you, at least have, the respect or something of, wait till you leave, man. Why you got to be high and groove? That's crazy, so it just, but that was, again, that's part of the nature of the beast, man. That's just what you deal with, And some people would just, I had one time came in, and I needed him to sign. I hadn't picked up on it. And I gave him my pen to sign. I can't even remember what it was that he needed to sign. Well, the pen that I used, had a little rubber on it, the part where you hold it. And so I gave him the pen, and he signs, and he gives me the paper and gave me the pen. And as we're talking, I got the pen in my hand, this time. As we're talking, the pen.
It smelled?
Yeah, from his fingers. The pen is like, and it's like, did you get high before you got here? If I had not given him that pen, usually I could pick it up, but especially weed. Yeah. But if I hadn't given him the pen, I would have never picked up on it. Wow. So you just never knew what was gonna. Someone would come in and just confess. Man, I messed up. Okay, dude. Yeah. And usually, depending on how well of a program they were working, they were making an effort, they were really trying. Yeah. If they came in and said, "Hey, went out Saturday night, man," and kind of put one on. Yeah. Then I would take care of it with them in-house, if you will. Just me and them. Let's do it. I'm not, and that's something that I very, very seldom did, was actually call the officer and say, "Hey, this guy's dirty. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna do. That's not. I didn't feel that was my job." Yeah. I know that these guys are probably going to get high, that they're probably still using. And so the guy comes in and confesses, hey, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to turn him in like that. I think that'll break trust. And that's what you're doing. They're like, breaking the trust. Why am I going to tell him the next time? So I would try to work it out with them, stuff. That's good. The self-pay clients that came in, I would tell them, look, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you're staying sober, but I do reserve the right from time to time, just because I kind of detect something, and I'll request you to go to a facility somewhere, to a testing site, and get a UA, bring me a copy of the results. And at that point, I would say, now, if you come in and if you go test, you come back negative, at that point, I'm either going to notify you that I am increasing the length of your therapy here, or the duration. Yeah. If you don't agree, then I discharge you from the program. You know? Because I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, and I'm trusting that you came in on your own, seeking help. If I detect that maybe something's going on, I'm going to ask you to go get a test. If you choose not to, you're out. We're done. If you come back, you've tested positive, then these are the terms, these are the conditions or the consequences. If you choose not to, then again, you're out.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
So there was just different ways of kind of taking care of that stuff.
Yeah, that's good. What are some things that you would consider pros and cons of that line of work, working with?
Well, again, if you're looking to help, if you're trying to be a servant and a helper, then there can be great reward in it. You're trying to get rich, it's probably not going to happen. You'll make a living, and in some cases, you can make a good living. But you're not going to get rich. If you take everything personal, it can be a problem. And so nothing is personal. You can't make anything personal. Even when, well, you're this, or Mr. Mancha, or when they would go and maybe talk to my partner and say, well, Mr. Mancha did this and it, you can't make anything personal. Because it's not. It's their struggle. The revisitism, if you let that affect you, if you start questioning your abilities, or are you doing any good, or really? I believe that there has to be a love of people. You have to love these people. You gotta love people in general, because in many cases, you're dealing with the worst of the worst. You're talking about individuals with not only substance abuse issues. You're talking about individuals with what they call co-occurring issues. We're talking mental health, bipolar, depression, all these things, anger. You're talking about pedophiles, homosexuals, wife beaters. In some cases, the worst of the worst. As a good counselor, a professional counselor, if you're going to do any good work at all, you have to be able to look beyond their dysfunction, their problems. If you can't do that, you're not going to be able to serve them. So you have to be able to look beyond the fact that this guy beats his wife. This guy is into little children. This guy, he's gay or she's lesbian. You gotta look beyond that. And when I first got into the field, because I grew up, homosexuals. We used to look for them and beat them up. When I was a kid growing up. The surrendering and accepting Christ helped me to be able to look at anybody now, and not look at their sin, but to look at their hearts and to love them. Scripture tells us, hate the sin, love the sinner. And so that helped me a lot coming into the field, to be able to not look at whatever his dysfunction is, or whatever issues he may have, but to look at the person and to look at their heart and to try to deal with and love them, basically. And if you can't do that, then in my opinion, you're never going to be any good at it, because you're going to be, because we already struggle with biases.
We all have.
And in some cases, prejudices, stuff. And so to have those front and center when you're dealing with people, you're not going to do it. So you got to be able to love love the sinner,
Yep.
you know.
Mm,
And
that's
so,
good.
and again, like I said, I think the you know, having become a Christian helped me prior to, you know, going into the counseling
Yeah.
and stuff. I was already with that mindset, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not easy. You know, you're dealing with human nature, and
Yeah.
some of the stuff that some people say, it's like, yeah, you got to take a deep breath because. And again, I was going to share with you earlier that there was a lot of clients that, you know, you just kind of, you know, you develop a bond with, and you try to do that with all of them.
Yeah.
It's not always possible.
Mm.
And so with some, you develop a really close bond, and you know, you you don't want to become their friends because you're not their friend, you're their therapist, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But there is a bond there, and there is a trust, and and so there's some clients that are really, really easy to deal with, and you just enjoy talking to them, and you enjoy listening to them, and you enjoy, you know, being in therapy with them.
Yeah.
And then there's others that from the moment they walk in your office, what you want to do is choke them, you know, and you got to learn to deal with that,
Yeah.
you know, because they're difficult people.
Yeah.
You know, they're hard. Everything, you know, and that's your opinion. You know, and just, you know, and so you got to kind of just slowly come at them and win them over. A lot has to do with winning them over and gaining their trust.
Yeah.
You know? And if you don't do that,
Yeah.
so, and there's a lot. There's just, you know, I'm sure that different counselors would give you different pros and cons, you know. But to me, the best thing was that at the end of the day, you know, you had that one client that came in and would share something with you that just, and you've had a horrible day.
Yeah.
Every client that walked in your office just didn't go well, you know, because it happens. And at the end of the day, you would have, or maybe first client that came in would share something with you that's like, all right, man. Or in the middle of a session, you know, my partner used to say, I saw his light bulb go on. He got it. And you saw that, you know, it's like, he's got it. And that would like, all right. It kind of reinforced, or, you know, what you were doing. You know? Okay. Now, because half of the morning I was sitting there going, what am I doing here? What am I doing up? And then one client would come in and they would help you.
Makes it worth it.
Yeah, make it worthwhile.
That's awesome.
The payoff.
Is there something you recommend for not taking your work home? Like kind of, you know, you get home and
can't.
No? It just sticks with you.
What I would do, because for a lot of years, probably a little bit more than half of the time that, well, no, even up to the end, a lot of I would have to drive to Odessa. Lived in Midland, drive to Odessa, 20 miles.
Okay.
For about half of that time, it was on a daily basis. And then the last 15 years of it, it was, you know, I drive to Odessa on the weekends.
Okay.
But I would always use the morning drive to kind of get into that zone, you know. It's not personal. Don't take it personal. Just kind of zone yourself in, get into that game, you know, that mentality. And then at the end of the day, I would use that drive home to, you know, put music on. Yeah. You know, I'm an old hippie, man. You know? So, you know, put the rock and roll on and put the car on cruise and just cruise on in home and use that time to zone out. You know, to get out of that zone. To again, it's not personal. Why are you making a big deal out of it? Blah, blah, blah. Because if you bring it home, yeah, you know, the day can be so bad sometimes that, yeah, you come home, you kill your family, you know, you know, because, and so for a lot of those years in my practice, especially in my earlier practice, my kids were young; they were growing up, and
Yeah.
it became a rule at the house because, again, for a lot of years I was doing residential. These clients become so needy, as I stated earlier.
Yeah.
I would pull into the parking lot in the morning, and they would, bum rush me at the car. Say, hey, can I get in my office?
Yeah.
And in the afternoon, they're escorted me to the car.
I gotta go.
We'll take care of it tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'll get on it tomorrow. And so I would get home, the kids,
Yeah.
Dad is like, So I had to develop a rule with the kids. I say, hey, until you see me take off my shoes, leave me alone.
That's it.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
And so I could see, like, sometimes I would laugh because I could see the guys at the end of the hallway. Still got his shoes on.
Does he have his shoes on?
Yeah, because it was the same. It was like I walk in the office, or get to the office, and it's like boom. Yeah. And I get home and it's like boom. Yeah. Guys, cut me some slack here. Let me get to the house. Let me check with mom. How's things going? You doing all right? How's your day? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. If there's bad news, let me get it. Let me absorb it. Let me deal with it. Yeah. And then we got the whole evening. We ain't got to rush into this. And so you have to. Yeah. You got to find assist. With me, again, the church helped a lot. Yeah. Prayer. And I would literally, my Sabbaths, especially in those days, were days of rest, both from a psychological, mental, physical, and just get away from that stuff. But I also developed a deal where I always gave my clients business cards. And I always had cards where on the one side had all the information, name, phone numbers, email addresses, whatever. On the back side, there was this place where we're writing in your next date, session date, and time. Okay. Because middle of the week, when's my next session? Did I not give you a call? Yeah. And so, I would always tell my clients, I am your counselor 24/7. I'm not just your counselor when you come here. Okay. You need to talk, something's going on. I don't care. I don't want you to call me at 2:00 in the morning. But if you're sitting there at 2:00 in the morning contemplating, you got a needle in your hand, you're thinking about shooting up. Yeah, I need you to call me. Suicide issues, I had several situations with suicides where they would, hey, I'm taking my life. Oh, wait a minute, And so, I had to develop I would sometimes during the course of the day, I would take a lunch. I would leave the facility. A lot of counselors don't, I would, and even if I had lunch or took lunch with me, I'd go park in the park, have lunch somewhere else, get away for an hour, or shut my door, put on music, lay down. I always had a cell phone in the office. Lay down, put some music on. I always found some manner, some way to escape, to get away. Especially if it was a heavy day. So you have to find those outlets. For me, it was the church, and it was my wife. I'd come home and I'd share things with her. Stuff. So you have to find those outlets. Other counselors, staff. You come in, you talk, you discuss. Or just get away. With me, a lot of it was music. Just put music on and just the clients. The mom did jamming, man. I would put the music on, turn it on. It's like, and I think they figured out that after when they heard loud music in the office, don't bother. Don't bother knocking like that song says. They don't. So it's just whatever works for you. I knew my partner, she did. What do they call that? Yoga. They did. They worked out. They went to the gym for an hour. Okay. I had one colleague who went swimming. He went to the swimming COM there in Midland and swam for an hour. Came home. that
Okay.
we're running. Just different things
Yeah,
that
yeah,
different clients do.
yeah.
You know,
That's good.
you have to because
Yeah,
it can. And I would give that advice to just dealing with your family. Forget your clients. Dealing with your
yeah,
family.
yeah, yeah.
You got to have that outlet. You got to
Mm.
have that somewhere to go on your own.
Yeah.
I had one colleague who rode Harleys,
Oh, nice.
and he would get on his Harley on Sunday afternoons
Yeah,
because the weather was good and take off
that's
by
right.
himself, drive 40, 50 miles on that Harley.
Yeah.
He said, bro, I take these back roads
Wow.
and I light that sucker up.
Yeah.
I'm flying in the wind, bro. And come back,
Yeah.
100-mile drive, come back, I'm a new man.
Nice.
And so it was just depending on the individual.
Yeah, yeah,
But you got to have those outlets. They're very important.
yeah. I say that a lot with mothers because
Mm-hmm.
they struggle to
Yes, very important.
disconnect, and when they become a mother, it's like, well, that's all I am for the next 18, 20 years. It's like, no, you can't lose your sense of
I
self.
still do that with my wife, and she, she's like, I'm going. See ya. I don't. Can I
Yeah,
go? No.
yeah,
If she's saying I'm going and didn't invite me,
yeah.
probably wants to be alone. It's like, see you later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When my wife used to go and do her own thing, my youngest daughter, Natalia, when she was little, she's like, "Who's gonna take care of us?" I'm like, she'd be like, "You have a dad."
Yeah.
She sees me as like this babysitter. Yeah, it's funny. I had a question. I wrote a couple of things down. You being bilingual, speaking Spanish, does that help bring more business?
Very important. Very important.
How
Yes.
did, how did that help?
Yes. Yes, it does. It does.
Mhm.
It's a benefit to be bilingual.
Yeah.
More than bilingual. Just if you know some other language, yeah, it works.
Okay.
But mostly,
Yeah.
Spanish and
Yeah.
English and Spanish.
Hmm.
From a business standpoint, in my part-time practice that I had in Odessa, we worked. Joe and I, the partner that I had over there, we worked that program on the weekends. He would be there Fridays and Saturdays. I was there Fridays and Sundays.
Okay.
And the reason for that was because we tried to cater to the oil field.
Okay.
I would say 85, 90% of our clients that came to us over there, one, were oil field. And I would say about 50 to 60% were Spanish speaking, literally Spanish speaking. And so having that benefit, it because the other 3 facilities that were there in Odessa, and in Odessa, the probation department clients, a lot of the clients that we got came out of the probation department. They didn't initially, when we first started that program, a lot of the probation officers would say, "I need you to go to Decisiones. I need you to go see Mr. Mancha. This is where I want you to go." Wouldn't give them an option.
Yeah.
But as time went on, different directors and stuff, they kind of changed those policies.
Yeah.
And they gave them a list, so they had an option. And I think there was 4 agencies there that they could go to or choose. We were the only bilingual agency.
Oh, wow.
So, and we were the only agency that were open on the weekends. Everybody else was, differential in their times, in that some days they were 8 to 5, some days 12 to 8, because they had night groups and stuff.
Yeah.
But no weekends. Very, very seldom did they do. They might come into the office an hour or two to see a client or two, but that was tops.
Yeah.
We were there all day long. And so yes, the bilingual made a world of difference. In the number of clients, that clientele that we could have. So and that was really beneficial to us. It was very it helped us a lot as far as So and Joe spoke Spanish fluently.
Okay. Yeah.
Where I speak well, but I still, in some cases, struggle. But I speak it well enough to where I can have a conversation
That's
with
good.
the next guy.
Yeah.
Whereas as Joe, he was fluent in both English and Spanish.
Yeah.
If he spoke
That's good.
English, you couldn't. If you're talking on the phone, it's like, is this guy Hispanic? You couldn't tell.
Okay.
There was no accent.
Oh, nice.
And if he spoke Spanish, it was like, all right,
Yeah.
I used to like listening to talk because his communication, and it wasn't so much the language or the knowledge of the language, but the presentation of the language. He was really good at it,
Yeah.
Stuff. So, but there was a huge benefit to that. Yes.
And are there companies that look for bilingual counselors?
A lot of your facilities now, since moving to San Antonio, I've looked into a couple of places because I thought about doing some part-time work.
Okay.
Not full-time.
Yeah.
Part-time.
Yeah.
And a lot of the facilities that I've looked into, bilingual preferred.
Okay.
Bilingual plus.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot.
Nice.
Because it does.
Yeah.
And especially in San Antonio.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to have a lot of bilingual folks.
Yeah. That's good.
The other thing that I was going to share with you when it comes to the language, I learned a long time ago in my practice that to be an effective counselor, and I think I spoke to you about this prior, that you had to become like a chameleon.
Okay.
In that you adapted to their needs.
Okay.
Not demand that they add to yours.
Yeah.
And a lot of that had to do with the language. You're going to have English speaking, bilingual, Spanish speaking, but you also have your street stuff. Your old, what they used to call cholos, the old pachucos of the day, who still speak the language. And I found through several instances that I would be communicating to a client who is an old pachuco, let's say, for example. The orale, que pasó, vato, and that kind of stuff, And I'm talking to him in English. And they understood the English, but didn't understand the so I learned that I had to kind of go down to their level and communicate. Again, I'm an old hippie. I come from the streets, if you will. So I know the language. I can communicate with the best of pachucos out there, if need be. And I learned that, because I would say something to a client and it was like, what's that mean, Mr. Mancha? And so, but if I spoke to them and I, Simón, Simón, and their slang. Simón, vato, fíjate que cuéntate. And it was like, órale, ya, Simón, ya. So I learned that to be an effective counselor, you have to kind of sometimes go down in the trenches down there with them, because if you're demanding that they come up to you, you lose them. And there was a lot of counselors who, they need to learn how to speak, and you're talking to a 50-year-old man that's been talking that way all his life. You're not going to get him to change. You're trying to get him to change his behavior, not the way he communicates. That maybe with time will come, but and there was a lot of counselors who would lose clients or not be effective because they demanded, cursing. Cursing. I didn't. A lot of counselors say, you need to watch your language. Again, I found that if I'm with a client, if I'm with you, we're doing a session, and we're talking about your abusive father who beat the heck out of you all your life and abused you all your life. And you're angry, but you're addressing this issue about your father. And the only way that you can effectively express what you want to say is to use that language to curse. I'm going to leave you alone. Right? Because because if Louis, watch your language.
Yeah.
I always felt that I was putting a roadblock in front of you. I was stopping you from what you needed to do.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't join them in their conversation. I didn't curse,
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to sit there and, hey, you need to show a little respect. Now, if we were in a group and there was females, which obviously they were, then yes, I would to both genders, male and female, I would say, hey, let's not talk vulgarly, describe a female's anatomy in a certain vulgar manner. Yeah, there's females in here. Careful. But I wouldn't stop them from using certain curse words and stuff because I felt that was kind of stopping the process.
Yeah.
And so I would leave them to Now, eventually, in time, I would say, hey, I need you to work on your language a little bit.
Yeah.
Curb it a little bit.
Yeah.
But initially, go do
Well,
what you got to do.
that's the I think that's the beauty of language, right? Like when a language is dead, like Latin, like you don't add anything. There's no more slang. There's no changes. It's just. But then, like, we're going to Mexico City. I'm from Monterrey. We're going to Mexico City, and I tell my kids, like, you're gonna find out because my oldest, they think they're fluent in Spanish, and I'm like, you are conversationally. I'm like, but you're gonna find out, like, in Mexico City, that's like Spanish. I go, there's even gonna be things that I don't understand being from Monterrey, in Mexico City,
even in Mexico, the different areas.
I even go back to Monterrey, and my cousins say stuff, and I'm like, man, like what is that, right? Like now I'm at the point in my life where I go to Monterrey, I don't understand that slang. My kids are growing up using other slang. I was like, I don't understand you. Like I'm just stuck in my world.
The kids are gonna be walking around going, "What did he say that?" Yeah. So.
But I mean, we use language to express ourselves, right?
And that's why it was important for me not to be. And at the same time, I always felt like I was being a kind of a goody two shoes. Hey, watch your language. Okay, come on, man.
Like no.
You come from the same place. What are you talking about? And so that was one of the reasons. But to me, it was important for them to. What I need you to do is to get out what you're feeling.
Yeah, that's the most important.
And to express it. I'm not going to be offended with the language you use. Now, again, I would be, if especially in a one-on-one.
Yeah.
Group wise, I would say, hey, do we need to describe in that manner? You can say, we were having sex or we're making love instead of using the other language. Come on. I mean, you got women in here. But then a lot of times you find that the women were just as bad as the men were. Like, okay.
What about her, sir?
But that was important. That was important to me to because I would even talk to my colleagues and I had other colleagues and counselors like, hey, what did I tell you about your language? Leave him alone. Let him say what he's going to say. I wouldn't say it in front of them, but I pull him outside. I said, why are you so critical about the language?
Yeah.
In time, as you progress, then
There's
you can bring it and say, hey, can we work on it? But initially, it's like, come on, guy. Let him do what he's got to do.
Yeah, I was like that. When I was a teacher, the kids would either call me Profe or Chavez. And I taught bilingual. So the monolingual students thought they were calling me Travis. So the monolingual kids would call me Travis. And there was this one teacher, man, she hated it. If she heard any kids either call me just Chavez or Travis, and they didn't put Mr., she would yell at them. And they're just like, So then later I would tell them, hey, if she's here, just tell me Mr. Chavez or Profe. I was like, when she's not here, you can call me whatever you want. So I was Travis to a bunch of kids.
I was always either Mr. Ray, Mr. Mancha. Usually it was Mr. Ray. But I would always tell my clients, don't call me hey you or dude. Okay. Mr. Mancha, Mr. Ray,
Yeah.
Ray. You
Yeah.
know, you say hey you to me, I'm not responding.
Yeah.
You know,
My daughter says bro a lot.
yeah,
I'm
bro,
like, I'm not your bro.
or boss. You know, hey boss man,
Yeah.
you're not in prison, dude. Right? In the free world. I'm not
Yeah.
your boss.
Yeah.
Let's not communicate that way.
Yeah.
That I would say yeah. Or you know, being in Midland and having grown up in Midland, there was a lot of clients that would come in that I had known, or I knew their family.
Oh, okay.
You know, and or they knew mine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the Manchas in Midland, they're like roaches, man. They come out of the woodwork. And hey, man, I know your cousin. Let's not go there. Again, this ain't got nothing to do with me or my family. Nothing to do with you.
Okay.
Initially, I would take offense to that. Hey, man, I know your cousin. Okay, and your point? You know, after a while, I kind of slacked up. Or they would say, hey, you related? And I would say, no, I don't know those people. But in time, it was like, yeah, I'm related to all them idiots. You know, every single one.
Got an answer for it. Yeah.
Initially, I felt like they felt like if they know my cousin or they know my brother, that
Okay.
I'm gonna cut them some slack or something, you know. And I would tell clients, if it got to the point, I would say, look, my son comes through this program, all right, and he don't walk the line, he's gone. Yeah. So think about that one. Yeah. You know, I that was the one thing that I did not when it came to discipline, I did not play favorites. You know, I did not. No, if I, you know, place some kind of consequence on you, I'm going to do it to the next guy. So male or female. Yeah. And so I think that if there's anything that a client could say to me, was that I was fair. Yeah. And that I was equal. I played no favorites with no one, you know, stuff. And I always made it a point to, I never addressed the client in group from a derogatory or negative or disciplinary. You know, if it got really bad, I would say, "Hey, let's go to my office. Let's go talk. Come on." Or I would say, "Hey, we'll talk about that in our session." You know, I would never share in group. Now, if there was something that I thought was important that you had shared with me in individual, and I thought that it was beneficial to the group, then I would say, "Hey, Louis, you mind if I share what we talked about?" "No, Mr. Magic, go ahead." Then I would share, you know, what experience you shared with me. Yeah. But that was seldom. But if I thought it was, I would, "Hey, you okay?" But I never yelled at you. I never disciplined you. I never addressed you. You know, yeah, I would make comments like, "That's dumb, man," you know, or something. And it's like, bro, where are you coming from? Where's that thinking coming from? You know? Yeah. But we're in group, you know. But you know, are you stupid or you need you know, I would, you know, if I had a client, a disruptive client, I would say, "Hey, I'm gonna tell you one time, man, settle down. Next time I'm just gonna ask you to leave." Yeah. And that's what I would do. "Hey, Mr. Chavez, why don't you go ahead and go home?" Yeah. Yeah. And that was it. You had to always working towards maintaining the trust and the encouragement to the client. Yeah. You know, to me, it was very, very important to encourage, to motivate. Yeah. You know, hey, oh, they got a job? All right, man. Yeah. Let me go get you Coca-Cola. You know, let me go get you an ice cream. You know? Yeah. Just, you know, it's like my son gets an A and we're going to go get ice cream. You know, that's what I did with the clients. You know, I was like, "Hey, man, way to go, dude." Man, I would get up from my desk and right on. I thought, she got you a JOB, bro. You got you a job, man. You know, that's good. Motivation, encouragement, motivation, encouragement. That was very, very important. And it is very important. Yeah. I think so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I wanted to ask you a question about, so my sister sent me a video And so I was like, oh, I'm gonna include that in my interviews. This girl was talking about how she became a nurse, right? And she was like, man, I wish I would have known about the schedule and how it affects my personal life. Because she works, I guess, 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And she's like, I have a baby and this schedule is tough, right?
That's hard. That's hard.
So can you speak to what, and I'm still trying to learn how to phrase this question. Can you speak to the life your career affords someone? Right? Like as far as like schedule and
What to do to your family?
yeah, like if you have a family, or if you're like, you know what, if I like to travel, maybe this isn't for me, or if I want like I don't want to be on call, like when I get home, I just want to be maybe this isn't a job for you, or right, like stuff like that.
As far as my wife is concerned, I think towards the probably the last 7, 8 years of before I retired, the focus was retirement.
Okay.
So, because I didn't have a retirement, I didn't have 401k. I didn't work for a company that I always had to create my own retirement and make my own retirement. And so the focus was on putting as much away as we could. All right. So, and so usually Sundays I was gone. I was working all day. Missed a lot of Cowboy football games. So, but by this time, the kids are grown. They're gone. So as far as the kids were concerned, while they were still at home, I was, there was probably 2 nights out of the week where I was getting home at 8 o'clock. Not a whole lot of night. I mean, I didn't do in those days didn't do a whole lot of weekend work. Certainly didn't work on Sabbath. Going back to school and studying to become a counselor, I think was beneficial to my children in being able to see, the going back to school, getting my degree, and becoming a counselor change my finances, if you will, majorly. I mean, majorly. And so that helped me to help them as best I could when they took off for school. But I think I like to think that them seeing the benefit of going back to school was a motivator for them to go to school themselves. With the kids growing up, with my kids at home growing up, it wasn't if you go to college, it was when you go to college. That was you don't have an option here. You're going to go to college. You're going to get a degree. You're going to get an education. But I think me going to school and them watching me, the sacrifices that I made to try to maintain employment, work. I didn't work all through the time I was going to school. I was able to go to school a year and a half full time, and not work. But going to school became the job. Those 3 semesters that I went full time, the first semester I took 21 hours plus labs. Yeah. Yeah. Believe me, in midterms and finals, I would cry at that, I think. But didn't learn anything. Came back the following 2 semesters, and took 18 hours plus labs. But that's what the idea was, to let's get through this, And so, they saw the sacrifices and the struggles. I remember when I graduated, 2 things happened when I graduated. One, because I worked at Midland College, and then I took classes at Midland College. The procession, they would have the graduations at the Chaparral Center, which is a basketball coliseum. They would have all the graduates on the upstairs level.
Okay.
And they would walk down these stairs and then walk through the middle of the faculty. They would be lined up here.
Cool.
And then they would walk up and then come around and then go and disperse themselves into their rows and their chairs.
Yeah.
As I came down and I'm walking through the faculty, they're lined up both sides. I held up the line several times because professors and people that I had worked with, or knew at the college, they would step out and shake my hand.
Cool.
And the people in front of me are way over there, and I'm holding up the crowd over here, which I thought that was pretty amazing. The way the professors, they would go, way to go, Ray. And we're talking, the deans of this department and, the chairman of that department and, professors and, that was pretty special to me. But when I walked across the stage and called out my name and I walked out across the stage, there was a loud, cheer from people, and in the middle of that noise, I heard Laura, my daughter, way to go, Dad. That was super. That was it. That made up for all the sacrifices that I made. So that was pretty sharp. Letty, my wife, was very understanding as far as working nights or working weekends or working. And she was also very, because like I said earlier, I gave all my clients business cards. Yeah. And you can call me anytime, And I would get phone calls from males and females. Okay. And phone would ring. I'd be like, hey, there's some woman. Uh-oh. My wife would not, who's that? Why was she calling? She was very, very understanding. She was there was times when it's like, I got to go meet this client. I got to go, he's in trouble. And not all the time, but there was occasions. And it's like, okay, be careful, Yeah. She learned also that, you got this breach of confidentiality thing that you got to be careful with. And I would tell the clients, if I see you at Walmart, all right, and we make contact, I'm not going to say hi. I'm not going to wave at you. Yeah. Now, you initiate, hey, Mr. Mancha. Okay, you did it. Yeah. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to look right at you. And if you don't say nothing, you don't wave at me, you do nothing, I'm going to look right at you and I'm going to look away. Wow. That's not, I'm not being rude, not being ugly. It's not that I don't want to talk to you. That's what I'm supposed to do. Yeah. And then with Letty, it was like, if someone comes up to me and introduces themselves and I don't introduce you, and I could, once they initiated, the conversation, oh, hey, Mr. Mancha, how you doing? Then you was, hey, this is my wife. I could, but I didn't, and she knew that if I didn't introduce her, it was a client. Okay. And those are the time when I run into somebody, hey, what's going on, man? I ain't seen you in a while. Hey, you met my wife? Or hey, this is my wife? Or, but they weren't clients. And so she knew that if I did introduce you, it was a client.
Wow, that's interesting.
So we did that. That happened a lot.
Yeah.
There was times, one of the times I was at IHOP. Uh-huh. And it was me and my wife, and I think it was like two other couples, friends from the church. Yeah. We'd gone out to eat, or I don't know. It was, anyway, there was like 6 of us at the table. Yeah. One of my very, very first clients that I had, and he continues to be a success story to this day, has been sober 25, 30 years. Wow. that guy would see me wherever. To this day, he sees me, and he's gonna make a beeline for me. And he's got this big old smile, and and I'm sitting at the table, and I looked up, and he's standing. He's waiting to be seated, and I look up and I see him, and he sees me, and he smiles, and I thought, here he comes, and he came up, and hey, Mr. Mancha, and of course I stood up. Hey, what's going on, guy? Stuff. He's not my client anymore. He was my client. He's not my client anymore at that time. What's going on? Hey, how you doing? You doing all right? Yeah, man. Yeah. And so I'm not introducing him to the people that I'm with. Again, not because of anything other than this. I was always very protective of this confidentiality thing. And so he turns to, I don't know, one of the brothers, and he said, hey, my name is, introducing Mr. Mancha was my counselor. He did it. He did it, Yeah. So, and that's the way it was with some folks. And some, there was some clients who, they looked at you and they looked away. And I would tell that to the clients, if I see you, and not that I'm being rude, because I had clients that come up, you looked right at me, you didn't say hello. We got this confidentiality thing. We got to be careful. So there was a lot of different things that went on. I had one incident where a client called me and he was threatening suicide, and it was like 1:00 in the morning. And so I learned through some of the training and experiences that when you have a suicide client, one of the first things you ask is, do you have a plan? How are you going to do this? I'm tired of living. And it was over his ex-wife. And she told me it's over and she doesn't love me anymore and I can't live without her and all this stuff. And so I said, hey, so you got a plan? How are you going to do this? He said, I'm sitting there with a 45 in my hand. And I thought, oh my God. So call 911. And I know where the client lives. All right. But I don't know the address of the house. I know the street. I know the house. I can get there. But I know the address. I call 911. Keep them on, So, and I get up and I take off, And unfortunately, 911 never got there. They never showed up, And now I'm sitting in this man's house with a 45. He's sitting on the floor, and I walked in. Wow. And it in about 5 minutes, I said, because he asked me, so are you scared? I said, yeah. And he said, why? He said, I never do anything to you. I said, no, it's not about what you would do to me. It's about what you're going to do to yourself, and I'm going to sit here and watch it. I said, so why don't you not mess up my brain that way and give me that weapon? And he gave it to me. So those did not happen. There were rare, instances. But yeah, you'd be surprised after 28 years of practice, what you hear, what you experience, the emotions that are there. And there was times when I would have conversations with clients, sessions with clients, and when they would leave, I would bust out crying, because it can be difficult, it just, that's why it's important not to take things personal, not to develop that kind of an intimacy between you and your, there's got to be a bond, and a respect and a trust. But you have to be really, really careful as to how close you get to a client, because when things happen, that's going to affect you. That's going to affect you.
Yeah, if you make yourself responsible for their choices, that's got to be tough.
And what's hard is for the counselor, the therapist, to be able to decipher that. what, did I play a role in this?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, I've had several clients who did commit suicide, but then those other clients, several that died of cirrhosis of the liver,
Mm-hmm.
accidents, um, were killed by someone else.
Yeah.
I had a female client that was killed by her son,
Wow.
who had mental issues.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had one client who he was Harley Davidson man to the core,
Mm-hmm.
biker to the core, man. Didn't run with anybody, just
Yeah.
rode Harleys.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this guy, I never had a car in my life. As much Harleys all his
Wow.
life. Had like 8 of them, different sizes, whatever. And he did tattoos. He's a tattoo artist. Very good. Mother lived in Florida, and he would once every other month or so he'd drive all the way to Florida
Wow.
in the rain, in the freezing cold. That's what he was Harley. He rode Harleys.
Yeah.
And in one of those trips coming back, semi pulled out in front. There were 2 semis, and one pulled out to pass, and killed him. And he was a really, really good guy. Just and that that kind of knocked me on my butt. It's a really good guy. And so there's instances like that occur. I mean, again, you're dealing with humanity, man. You're dealing with life, and those things happen.
Yeah.
In medical emergencies, they pass out. Sugars, strokes, diabetic shock stuff, strokes, faint. One client had a heart attack in my office. It's like, so yeah. And the guy that had the heart attack, if he didn't weigh 300 pounds, he didn't weigh nothing. And so you panic, but you gotta act.
Yeah.
You gotta hey,
You gotta
call
respond.
911 and do CPR and whatever you gotta do. I mean, and that's scary.
Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
in from the word go, you have these clients' lives in your hand.
Yeah.
Their futures, their well-being.
Mm-hmm.
But when they get sick or they pass out or things like that happening, right there, it's like, oh my God, what do I do?
It's got real.
Yeah, you gotta act. You gotta act. So
that's good.
For me, it's been the 28 years that I practiced. Despite everything, I wouldn't have changed it for the world. And I'm grateful every day that I was able to do that. To be able to serve in that way, to help others. And I don't know, from a statistic, let's say, standpoint, I could tell you, how do I put it? I couldn't tell you my success rate.
Okay.
Or,
no,
but I used to have a counselor who say, hey, in the end, if we get one clean and he stays clean, it's a success.
It's like the starfish.
And to me, it was like, one? Just one? But like I said earlier, the revisitism is so high that, you'll take that one. And maybe the next guy will get one.
Well, it's not that it ends up not just being one, right? Because generationally it impacts their spouse and that's what you hope for. That if anything, that one will break that cycle. And if that happens, then now you're talking a generation. You had two or three generations of alcoholics, and that one broke the cycle. Now you have 2 or 3 generations of none. That's that's a success. So it's it's important work. Have you heard the starfish story?
No.
Where there's a little boy. There's a bunch of starfish on the beach, and there's this little boy throwing starfish back. And this man comes up and he's like, "You're never going to save all of them." And he's like, "It's okay. It matters to this one." And he throws a starfish. And it matters to this one. Right? Like he can save the ones he can save.
Exactly.
Even if he can't save all of them.
And that's what you do.
Yeah. I want to end with 2 questions that I ask all my guests. First one is, how do you define success? Not just in your work, but just in life. How do you right now, how do you define success?
Wow. I don't know. We all got to work, right, in life.
Yeah.
And I've always thought that if you're gonna do, if you got to work, then you want to be able to do something that you enjoy, that you're going to get some kind of satisfaction from. And it's like I stated earlier, when I first started building, because I was learning to build and do this construction, the different kinds of construction work, when I achieved or I built or I finished a job, it was like, okay, that looks nice. And there was satisfaction in that. But after a while, because you do it every day, it was like, So it was just, now it's just about making a living, making money. And I got to a point where I wasn't satisfied with that. I wanted to do something different. To me, I've raised 3 kids, 3 human beings. They're all doing well. They're not perfect, and they're not, just wonderful, wonderful people, but they're good people. Morals, ethics. They minister the word. They're gifted. They have talents and abilities. They have good hearts. That's been important. I wasn't always a good person as a young man, but I became a good father, and I eventually became a good husband, I think. My children and my wife would probably question that. But I like to think that I have been a good father. And I continue to be. I have served both my community, my church. I was baseball, football coach. I did youth work for better than 12 years. I served my church in all kinds of capacities. I pastored a church. I've done a lot of things in my life that I enjoyed doing. Mm-hmm. And my work was a big part of that. I am retiring now. I'm not a rich man, but I am satisfied in so many ways with the outcome, in that I've done well. Mm-hmm. I've made major changes in my life that I think make me a better person. Yeah. I'm not a just absolutely wonderful guy, man. I have my issues and struggles like everybody. Mm-hmm. I think that's what I would use to define success. That my children, that I raised good kids, mm-hmm. not perfect, but good kids. Mm-hmm. That I've been married to the same crazy gal for almost 48 years. Wow. That we've built a life together, that we've grown old. It to me, it's never been about money. Yeah. I like having a buck just like the next guy does, or making a buck just like the next guy does. Yeah. But it's never been about money. It's about simply building on what little bit God has given me, and being content with that. Yeah. So for me, success hasn't been about houses and finances and money. It's about what I've done with what I've been given. I'm very proud of the work that we did in my church in Midland. Mm-hmm. we served there for 12 years, as I served as pastor for 12, 13 years. Um, the success that we had there, the growth that happened, I like to believe that I left the church in good hands and in good condition.
Mhm.
There's still a lot of stuff that could have been done, a lot of growth that could have happened. Um, that's where I define success.
Yeah.
Because as far as money, I didn't make money. I haven't made money in my life. I've lived. I've paid my bills. I've been able to help my children in different ways, especially trying to get them through school.
Yeah.
That was important to me. You know, my kids, my family was priority.
Yeah.
And when I see them now, you know, especially my son Michael, um, he still talks to me or communicates with me, and I don't want this is not meant to be an insult or anything to Michael because he's a very intelligent, good man, good father, good husband. He's I'm really proud of him. But when he communicates with me in the conversations that we have, I still feel like I'm talking to a 16-year-old kid who wants to know his or seeks his father's advice and direction.
That's
That
good.
yeah,
That's
that makes me really
yeah.
proud that my son still
Yeah.
Isaiah he's and again on the other hand with Isaiah he's extremely independent,
Mhm.
but that also makes me proud
Yeah.
and that I like to think that I raised a good strong independent man.
Yeah.
Not that Mike was not,
Mhm.
and Laura the same thing,
Yeah.
just extremely independent and strong and um, but yeah that's what's been important to
Yeah.
me, you know, for my wife to I still I think that we still look at each other and still see that 17-year-old kid that we
Yeah.
saw
Yeah.
almost 50 years ago, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So those are the things that I think
Yeah.
for me define success,
Yeah.
not money, not,
Yeah.
the idea that I've been able to serve has been a privilege to me.
Yeah. So I would summarize it as impact and legacy. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. That's good, man. I like it. And then the second question is, and this one's a two-part because you have kids. What was told to you as far as careers, like coming out of high school? And what did you tell your kids? And or what would you want your kids to tell your grandkids?
Well, like I said earlier, I think I always told my kids, look, again, Laura, from the word go, is going to be a teacher.
Mhm.
She was a teacher when she was 3 years old. You know, Laura wasn't the kind of kid, from what I remember, that would, you know, you kids, they get to that um, um, why period, you know, why this, why that, why
Oh,
that,
okay, okay, okay.
why this guy blue? Why? Laura was the kind of kid. She wouldn't come and ask you, why is this guy blue?
Should tell
She
you.
would come and say, do you know why this guy's blue? You know, and she would tell you, you know, her version, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think I tried to always tell my kids, you know, look, be responsible and be independent and especially with Laura, you know, I part of my raising with her, or what I tried to teach her was to not to be dependent on a man.
Mhm.
I didn't want her to not be submissive to her husband
Yeah.
to some degree, but to not have to depend on him
Mhm.
to live, you know.
Yeah.
So it's like you're going to go to school, you're going to education, you're going to be able to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
But I want you to practice, study something that you're going to enjoy doing,
Mhm.
that you're going to, because you're going to have to work.
Yeah.
So you might as well have fun at it, you know, at your work. It's the same thing with the boys, you
Yeah.
know. Go to school and learn to do something that you're going to enjoy doing, you know. Because there's a lot of people out there that are working at jobs or even at trades or even at stuff they learned and degrees that they got
Yeah.
at things they don't like, and they're unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important to be able to, we got to work.
Yeah.
So let's be able to go to a job, get up, and let's see what progress I can make today.
Yeah.
How can I impact today? How can I make a difference?
Yeah.
And that's always been important to me. Both in my work, but also in my ministry, in the church. The brothers and sisters, I tell them, let's, how can we make changes? How do we make improvements?
Mm-hmm.
With our church, our community,
Yeah.
and with humanity, because that's what we're called to do, to
Yeah.
change humanity, to spread the gospel, to tell them the good news, and in that we put our hope and our faith and trust in that God will, that things will be better.
Yeah.
Um, so I always tried to, don't, Michael was going to be a rock and roller. He was going to be, when he first got out of high school. I think he actually saw himself in a coliseum with 100,000 screaming fans. And initially, because Michael took 2 years before he went back to college out of high school,
Okay.
if I remember right.
Yeah.
And initially, it's like and I always supported them, and behind him all the way, and yeah, I dreamed right along with him. I would have loved to have seen him in front of 100,000 screaming fans.
Yeah.
But eventually, it's like, until you get to that coliseum with 100,000,
Yeah.
you gotta find something to do. Something. Not that he wasn't, because he was working. I mean, he worked,
Yeah.
but he wasn't going to school. And it's like you gotta find something to fall back on. It's like that superstar athlete that's out there making millions. He's not going to play ball all his life, And so, yeah, eventually he went back to school, but I try to always encourage him to do something that they
Enjoy.
that they were going to enjoy doing. And I always try to motivate them to do when they were kids. Try this, try that, try this, try that.
Yeah.
And they ended up doing things that I would have never. Isaiah, all the kids played band in the band. Laura and Michael, I think they played through the 9th grade, or maybe just through the 8th grade.
Yeah.
Isaiah decided he was gonna march. He was gonna be in the marching band and stuff. And I thought, first couple of days in those August summers, those heat waves, and he'll be done. He marched all 4 years, and I'm assuming he had a blast at it, and stuff. So again, I was trying to encourage them to do things that they were gonna enjoy. I was gonna make them happy, and I think he's doing that to this day, man. Music is his life, and he enjoys doing it. And pretty much everything that he does is music videos, music. Plays music, he jams, he plays. So yeah. So I would always encourage, and I tell the kids now, Jude, he's playing ball there for a while. He's coming up pretty good. It looked like he's made changes now. He's leaning towards music and some other things. And it's like, hey, look for what's going to make you happy, man. Look for what you're going to enjoy. We got a young actress in the family, Sophia. She loves to act and those kind of things. And she seems to love it, So it's like, I try to just encourage her, I remember last year, I think was it last year? She was in a play at school, and I thought she had a lot of lines, and then she sang songs, and it when it's all over, afterwards, it was like, yeah, you had a lot of lines. She said, "Grandpa, I forgot a lot of them," but she improvised and covered pretty good. I thought, I never saw that. I didn't see you skip a beat, So, but that's what they enjoy doing, and as long as they're doing and having fun at it, hey, why not, man? as long as it's having fun at it and doing good and they're not getting into trouble, yeah,
Yeah.
go for it, man. You know?
Yeah. That's what I love about sports.
Yeah,
Kept me out of trouble.
yeah.
Very cool. Love it. Do you have any closing advice? Anything you want to share with young people that want to be counselors potentially?
Well, I think the only thing that I would say is that if you're going to get into, as I stated earlier, if you're going to get into the counseling field, it's got to be a love thing. You got to have a love for people,
Yeah.
and you got to have a good ear. You know, um, I can be a very, I can chatter a lot and I can talk a lot because I enjoy talking.
Mhm.
But I didn't do a lot of talking with my clients.
Mhm.
I learned to listen also and to be able to listen
Yeah.
and yeah, I shared things with them and communicated with them, but it was their session and their hour and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and so don't, if you're going to be a good counselor, you got to love them. And counseling is not giving advice.
Mhm.
It's listening to them and then trying to help them to redirect their their thinking
Mhm.
and to try to help them for them to figure things out.
Yeah.
Not, well, if it was me, I would do,
Yeah.
or I think you need to. No,
Mhm.
it's not. Counseling is not giving advice.
Yeah.
You know,
Interesting.
it's helping them to redirect their thinking.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's got to be a love thing, um, and don't take it personal. You know,
Yeah.
because you're always going to be dealing with people's emotions, and sometimes those emotions will come out the wrong way,
Mhm.
and it appears like an attack on you.
Mhm.
But it's not.
Yeah.
And so um,
Like.
counselor's a good field, and you can make a good living at it, and I think there's a lot of reward in it. Um, but there's also again, especially in the field that I was in the area I was in, um, there can be a lot of letdown,
Mhm.
and there is a lot of revisitism. So um, don't take it personal.
Yeah.
You know, they're not relapsing because you're a sorry counselor.
Mhm.
They're relapsing because they choose to.
Yeah.
So that's
Good
what I
advice.
think. That's what I would advise.
I like that. Very cool, man. I'm gonna have you back in like a year so you can talk about retirement. Are you?
I think I'm gonna be pretty good at that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You enjoying it so far?
Yes, I am. Because there's been I retired and I moved.
Yeah.
Of course, and so that's been an adventure
Yeah.
and a lot of work.
Yeah.
We've been moving for over a year and a half.
Oh
It
wow.
wasn't we moved
Yeah.
3 months ago. No,
Uh-huh.
we started moving about a year and a half ago
Okay.
and packing and
Yeah.
then it was a battle. My wife now, when we were in Midland, we were packing. It's like, why do you need to take everything? We don't know where we're going. We don't know what kind of a house we're going to find,
Yeah.
how big or how small or how what. We may not be able to have room for all this stuff. And she wanted it. We pretty much brought everything. And so, and yes, we bought a house that was a bit smaller than what we were in Midland.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've had to figure out where to put things, and some things we've given away. And in Midland, we sold a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So so we've been packing and then get here, and the move was easy.
Okay.
The actual move
Yeah.
was easy.
Yeah.
Finding a house, thank God we were blessed, was easy.
Yeah.
It was again packing and then now unpacking and
Yeah.
you know and at the same time we're doing things to the house that is us,
Mhm.
you know, the way
Yeah.
the way we want it, you know, and stuff. And so, yeah, it's been a lot of work. We're starting to slow. We've gotten past the worst, you know,
Yeah.
and
That's
so,
good.
but it's been an adventure. It's been fun,
Yeah.
and it's been different. And uh, obviously, San Antonio is a bigger city,
Yeah.
and learning to navigate and maneuver through the city and
Mhm.
finding the back roads and
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. There's a
uh,
lot of traffic here.
yeah, Janie, uh, Ray's wife,
Uh-huh.
Sister Janie,
Yeah.
was the one that said, um, find the back roads and kind of get
Mm.
around and use the service roads
Yeah.
and I thought, yeah, we're not in a hurry. We don't need to get into car fast. I
Yeah,
don't
you're
I don't need to be at the
right.
job at 8, or I don't, so we do,
Yeah, those are the people that are rushing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's like and Michael, one of the times we were talking, he says, well, Dad, I think probably the most expensive thing that you're gonna the difference that you're gonna see expense that you're gonna see is gas.
okay.
Because and I said, well, it's not like we're going to be up and down the city all day long, Michael. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
that's you because you got to go to work. I take kids to
Yeah.
school. You got to do the. I'm not going to do that. I
Yeah.
mean, I may not leave the house all day long.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
That's true.
it's been different, but
Yeah.
it's been and it's been a challenge,
Yeah.
but it's also been fun.
That's cool.
And it's been me and the wife.
Yeah.
Me and her.
Yeah.
And so a lot of debating, a lot of arguing. Anyway,
Yeah.
my wife is a kind of, I need you to do that. And then, why are you doing it like
Uh,
that? So
You're
one
not
of
doing it
those
right.
kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's me and her.
That's cool.
That's the fun part.
Yeah, I'm gonna have you back. Cause it's just my line of work, right? Like I think I would like to cover just anything and everything related to work,
Mhm.
which includes like people need to think about retirement.
Yeah.
A friend of mine was real smart. He came out of the army, and he worked. He got a job for the city of Austin, knowing that they would count his army years towards his retirement. And the city of Austin, when he applied, probably still now, but they have a 20-year retirement. So he was in his mid-20s. He only had to work 17 years. He'll be eligible to qualify next year. He'll only be 43, 44.
That's nice.
So he thought about he thought about that early.
And he'll probably end up finding something else to get into.
Yeah. I told him retire and then go do something
unless
else.
you actually have that kind of money where you can take all kinds of vacations and go and be there and do that.
Yeah.
Then that would be great. But in most cases, and even then, man, it's like how much golf can you play? How many trips can you actually take? That's so. You end up finding something. It's like me now. It's like what can I get into and do? Because I'm not I go through episodes. I could sit around for days at a time, and there's good sports on. I'm watching the sport. And then I go through episodes where it's like I gotta get up and I'm out and I'm doing and I'm building this. Let these just say you tear things up to refix them. Just to be doing things, So, yeah. In Midland, when we were getting ready to sell the house, because I'm a builder, I see, I see what needs to be repaired or touched up, and so I'm finding things, and we need to fix this, and we need to, and Letty finally told me, you need to stop looking. Stop looking. We're selling the house as it is. Yeah, but that doesn't look right. And just a little touch here. I had to pay that. And eventually it was like, stop. Stop. I had to go through the house and look down at the floor because if I'm looking up, we got to take care of that. We got to fix it. And so I go through those episodes where I'll sit around and I'll tell my wife, I ain't don't mess with me. I ain't doing that. And I won't do nothing. I'll sit there and watch TV all day long, And then there's days where it's like, I got to get up. And then I'll go 3, 4, 5 days nonstop all day long. If the weather's good, Um, everybody's been telling me that may change as it gets hotter, but everybody's been telling me you're going to see the difference in heat in West Texas and heat in San Antonio.
Yeah.
And yeah, it gets hot.
Yeah.
But West Texas heat is hot.
Oh yeah.
Here you have a little humidity
Oh yeah.
that I think puts a cloud over stuff. And then, yeah, it's hot. Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm inside the house or in the office.
That's my dad.
Here, I find myself in the yard. I'm out, it's hot,
Oh, wow.
but it's not the same. It seems like I can tolerate it here better than in Midland. If I was going to do anything, it's early in the morning. By 11 o'clock, I'm in the house because it was hot. So,
that's my dad here.
Yeah.
He wakes up early. He's like, by noon, he's like, no me hablen. I'm inside.
I know that one.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on.
Lewis, it's been fun.
And yeah, man, we learned a lot. And thank you guys for tuning into my line of work. I hope today's video inspired you to find the work you love. If there's a career you're curious about, drop it in the comments. We'd love to feature it. Hasta la próxima.